The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and ruby as the sleek, black sedan glided through the rain-slicked streets of downtown Chicago. Inside, Elias Volkov, a man whose presence commanded immediate, unspoken respect, stared out the tinted window, his mind a labyrinth of strategies and silent threats. His tailored suit, a second skin of charcoal gray, only amplified the hard lines of his jaw and the cold intensity in his steely blue eyes. At 38, Elias had long since shed any illusions of a soft life, choosing instead to carve his empire out of the city's unforgiving underbelly. Power was his language, and control, his religion. Yet, tonight, a flicker of something unidentifiable stirred within him, a premonition perhaps, of a deviation from his meticulously charted course. He had no way of knowing that a chance encounter, a simple twist of fate, was about to introduce him to a woman whose fiery spirit would challenge the very foundations of his carefully constructed world. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. Meanwhile, a few miles away, in the vibrant, somewhat chaotic heart of the city's artistic district, Alara Vance was battling her own storm. Not of rain, but of deadlines and artistic frustrations. Her studio, a cozy loft above a bustling bakery, was a sanctuary of canvases, paints, and the scent of turpentine. Tonight, however, it felt more like a cage. A commission for a demanding gallery owner loomed, and her latest piece, a vibrant abstract capturing the raw energy of urban life, wasn't quite hitting the mark. Alara, with her cascade of fiery red hair and eyes that sparkled with an almost defiant independence, was a creature of passion. Her art was her voice, her freedom. She lived simply, poured her soul into her work, and deliberately steered clear of anything that hinted at drama or danger. She had a strong moral compass, a fierce work ethic, and a deep-seated belief in the beauty of ordinary life, a stark contrast to the shadowy world Elias inhabited. Her routine was a comforting rhythm, early mornings spent sketching at local cafes, afternoons lost in the vibrant chaos of her studio, and evenings often ending with a quiet book and a cup of herbal tea. She navigated the city with an unassuming grace, a woman utterly content in her own skin, oblivious to the undercurrents of power that flowed beneath the surface of her everyday existence. She believed in hard work, in earning her keep, and in the simple joy of creating something beautiful from nothing. Her world was one of color and light, far removed from the stark, monochromatic reality that defined Elias Volkov. It was a Tuesday evening, dreary and damp, when their two worlds irrevocably collided. Alara had braved the persistent drizzle to pick up a special canvas she'd ordered from a niche art supplier across town. Her worn trench coat offered little protection against the chill, but her spirits were high. She was finally going to finish the piece that had been nagging at her. As she emerged from the shop, juggling the oversized canvas and her umbrella, a sudden, blinding flash of headlights momentarily disoriented her. A sleek, black luxury sedan, seemingly out of nowhere, swerved sharply to avoid a stray dog that had darted into the street. The vehicle skidded, its tires protesting with a screech that echoed through the narrow alley, and in the split second of chaos, Alara lost her footing. The canvas flew from her grasp, landing with a sickening thud in a rapidly growing puddle. More importantly, she felt a sharp pain as her ankle twisted beneath her. From the darkened interior of the sedan, Elias Volkov watched the scene unfold. His driver, a man named Kashin, quickly regained control, bringing the car to a smooth stop. Elias, usually impassive, felt an unexpected jolt. The woman, a flash of red hair against the gray urban backdrop, was sprawled on the wet pavement, her precious canvas now ruined. He saw the immediate dismay on her face, the way her shoulders slumped, not from pain, but from a profound disappointment. There was an innocence, a raw vulnerability in her reaction that was utterly alien to his world. "Stop the car," he commanded, his voice low and firm. Kashin, surprised by the abrupt order, complied without question. Elias stepped out, his presence immediately dominating the small, rain-swept alley. He moved with an effortless power, his expensive shoes barely making a sound on the wet asphalt. Alara, still trying to push herself up, looked up, her rain-streaked face now etched with a mixture of annoyance and a nascent fear. He was tall, impossibly so, and his eyes, even in the dim light, held a piercing intensity that made her breath catch. He was a storm in human form, a dangerous, alluring presence that felt utterly out of place in her quiet, artistic world. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the damp air. It wasn't a question of concern, but an assessment, a demand for information. Alara, flustered and in pain, struggled to find her voice. "My ankle," she managed, wincing as she tried to put weight on it. "And my canvas. It's ruined." She gestured weakly to the soaking, mud-splattered artwork. Elias's gaze followed hers, then returned to her face. He saw the genuine distress, the disappointment that transcended mere inconvenience. He felt a strange pull, a reluctant admiration for her unvarnished honesty. He knelt, a powerful man reducing himself to her level, and gently, almost imperceptibly, assessed her ankle. His touch, brief and professional, sent a shiver down her spine. "It's not broken, but it needs attention," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "My driver will take you to a clinic." Before she could protest, he turned to Kashin. "Take her to Dr. Petrov. Ensure she receives the best care." Alara stared, wide-eyed, at the man who had just issued commands as though her life were merely a logistical detail in his intricate schedule. "Wait, what? I don't need a clinic. I just need to get home," she stammered, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. But Elias Volkov was not a man accustomed to having his directives questioned. His steely gaze hardened, a silent warning that brooked no argument. He stood, towering over her once more, an unyielding force against the backdrop of the rain-swept alley. "You will go to the clinic. Your ankle requires immediate attention to prevent further injury," he stated, his voice a low, authoritative rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very pavement. He didn't offer a choice, he presented a decree. There was an unnerving certainty in his tone, a complete lack of doubt that she would comply. Before she could articulate another protest, Kashin, a man whose quiet efficiency was as unsettling as his employer's dominance, was already opening the back door of the luxurious sedan. The interior was a cocoon of dark leather and polished wood, a stark contrast to the gritty urban exterior. Alara hesitated, her mind racing. This was all wrong. She didn't know these men. She didn't want to be indebted to them. But the throbbing pain in her ankle was intensifying, and the thought of navigating the treacherous walk home in the rain, alone, was daunting. With a sigh of frustrated resignation, she allowed Kashin to gently assist her into the car. The scent of expensive leather and a faint, masculine cologne filled the air, a scent that, for some inexplicable reason, felt both unsettling and strangely comforting. Elias watched her settle in, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before he turned and spoke quietly to Kashin, his words too low for Alara to catch. Then, without another glance, he slipped into the passenger seat beside her, closing the door with a soft thud that sealed them within their opulent, temporary prison. The car pulled away smoothly, leaving the ruined canvas behind, a symbol of her disrupted routine. The silence inside the car was thick, punctuated only by the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. Alara hugged herself, acutely aware of Elias's formidable presence beside her. He sat perfectly still, his profile etched against the passing city lights, an enigma of power and control. She risked a glance at him, trying to decipher the man who had so effortlessly taken charge of her evening. He was undeniably handsome, in a severe, almost dangerous way. His features were sharp, his jawline strong, and his eyes, when they occasionally met hers in the rearview mirror, held a depth that hinted at untold stories. "You didn't have to do this," she finally said, her voice a little shaky, breaking the oppressive silence. He turned his head slowly, his gaze piercing. "I did. My driver was responsible for the distraction. It is my responsibility to ensure you are cared for." His words were clipped, precise, devoid of warmth, yet there was an undeniable logic to them. He wasn't being kind, he was being accountable. It was a cold form of chivalry, one that left her feeling more unsettled than grateful. I can pay for it myself, she insisted, her pride flaring. I don't need charity. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. It is not charity. It is an obligation. And I assure you, Dr. Petrov's services are not something you would typically pay for yourself without significant difficulty. The implication hung in the air, he moved in circles far beyond her reach, circles where money was no object, and influence was currency. Alara bristled, but the pain in her ankle reminded her of her current vulnerability. She hated feeling helpless, hated being indebted. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the question escaping before she could stop it. The question felt audacious, almost reckless, given the aura of unspoken power that surrounded him. Elias paused, his eyes holding hers for a beat longer than necessary. His gaze was intense, analytical, as if he were weighing her, assessing her worthiness of an answer. My name is Elias Volkov, he stated, his voice a low, resonant baritone. The name itself seemed to carry weight, a subtle tremor of recognition in the very air. He offered nothing more, no explanation of his profession, no pleasantries. Just the name, delivered with the quiet authority of a man who needed no further introduction. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. The car arrived at a discreet, modern building with a polished brass plaque that simply read Petrov Medical Group. It didn't look like a typical clinic, it had the sleek, understated elegance of a high-end private residence. Cashin opened her door, and this time, Elias also exited, his presence a constant, formidable shadow. Inside, the waiting area was empty, bathed in soft, indirect lighting. A receptionist, impeccably dressed, greeted them with a deferential nod that was clearly directed at Elias. Mr. Volkov. Dr. Petrov is expecting you. Her voice was hushed, respectful. Alara was led into a pristine examination room, where a calm, efficient doctor with kind eyes quickly and expertly assessed her ankle. Dr. Petrov confirmed it was a sprain, not a break, but a significant one that would require rest and elevation. He applied a brace and provided her with pain medication, all while Elias stood silently in the corner, observing every detail, his gaze unwavering. When the examination was complete, Elias stepped forward. Ensure she has everything she needs. Arrange for transportation home, and follow-up care as necessary. His commands were succinct, leaving no room for interpretation. Dr. Petrov nodded. Of course, Mr. Volkov. We will ensure Miss Vance is comfortable and well cared for. Alara felt a wave of unease. The ease with which Elias dictated her care, the instant obedience of everyone around him, solidified a chilling realization: this man wasn't just wealthy, he wielded a power that was absolute and unquestioned. He wasn't merely a successful businessman, he was something more, something darker, more profound. The way Dr. Petrov had referred to her, Miss Vance, felt almost like an acknowledgement of her new, albeit temporary, status as Elias Volkov's concern. I can take a taxi home, Alara stated, trying to assert some semblance of independence, even as the pain medication began to dull the sharp edges of her discomfort. Elias turned to her, his expression unreadable. That will not be necessary. Cashin will take you home. And then he will ensure your studio is secure and your ruined canvas replaced. Her jaw dropped. My canvas? You can't just replace my canvas. It was a specific order, and it's not just about the material cost. It's the time, the effort, and it was already primed. A flicker of something akin to amusement crossed Elias's face, quickly suppressed. Details. Cashin will handle it. Rest assured, you will have a new canvas, identical in specifications, by tomorrow morning. And if you require assistance with the priming, we can arrange that too. His tone indicated that arranging was synonymous with making it happen. No matter what. Alara felt a strange mix of exasperation and grudging awe. He was infuriatingly controlling, yet undeniably efficient. He treated her like a problem to be solved, a loose end to be tied up, but he was solving it with a terrifying thoroughness. Cashin materialized by her side, offering a steady arm as she gingerly stood. The brace felt foreign, restrictive, but the pain was indeed receding. "Thank you, Dr. Petrov," she managed, her gaze still flicking towards Elias, who remained a silent, imposing figure. As Cashin led her back to the sedan, Elias remained behind, exchanging a few low words with the doctor. Alara couldn't hear them, but she didn't need to. The air around Elias hummed with an unspoken authority, a quiet menace that was both captivating and terrifying. The drive back to her studio was quieter than before. Alara leaned her head against the cool leather, her mind a whirlwind. This man, Elias Volkov, had crashed into her ordered life like a meteor, leaving behind a trail of disruption and an unsettling sense of obligation. She was a woman who prided herself on her self-reliance, and now, she was beholden to a stranger, a dangerous stranger, whose world was clearly far removed from her own. When they arrived at her loft, Cashin, with surprising gentleness, helped her up the 2 flights of stairs. He unlocked her door, his movements fluid and practiced, as if breaking and entering was a mere formality. Alara watched him, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. He wasn't just a driver, he was an enforcer, a shadow. Inside, her studio, usually a sanctuary of creativity, now felt exposed, vulnerable. Cashin did a quick, silent sweep of the loft, checking windows and doors with an almost imperceptible efficiency. He then laid out the pain medication instructions on her small kitchen counter, poured her a glass of water, and even retrieved a comfortable blanket from her sofa. "Mr. Volkov will be in touch regarding the canvas," Cashin said, his voice flat, devoid of personal inflection. "Please do not hesitate to call this number if you require anything at all." He placed a small, discreet business card on the counter. It bore only a name, Cashin, and a single phone number. No company logo, no address. Just a direct line to a world she was rapidly learning was far more complex than she'd ever imagined. With a final, deferential nod, Cashin left, closing the door softly behind him. Alara was alone again, but the silence felt different now. It was heavier, tinged with the lingering presence of the men who had just invaded her space. She looked at the business card, then at her bandaged ankle, then around her studio, suddenly seeing it through new eyes. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like a place that had been surveyed. The next morning, true to Elias's word, a new, perfectly primed canvas, identical to the one ruined, was delivered to her door. It arrived with a note, hand-delivered by a man in a dark suit who simply stated, "From Mr. Volkov." The note itself was brief, typed, and signed only with an elegant EV, "For your inconvenience. My apologies for the disruption. Elias." Alara stared at the pristine canvas, then at the note. Apologies? From a man who commanded an entire medical group and replaced ruined art with a single phone call? It felt less like an apology and more like a statement of fact, a closing of a transaction. She felt a strange mixture of relief and resentment. Relief that her work could continue, resentment at the manner in which it had been facilitated. Days turned into a week. Her ankle slowly healed, but the memory of Elias Volkov, of his imposing presence and his unsettling power, lingered. She tried to push him from her mind, to return to her routine, but it was impossible. Every time she looked at the new canvas, she thought of him. Every time she felt a twinge in her ankle, she remembered his cold, assessing gaze. One afternoon, a week after the incident, her phone, which rarely rang for anything beyond friends or gallery calls, buzzed with an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. "Miss Vance." The voice was deep, resonant, and instantly recognizable. Elias Volkov. A shiver ran down her spine. "Mr. Volkov," she replied, her voice more steady than she felt. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" The sarcasm was subtle, but it was there. A low chuckle, dry and unexpected, echoed through the line. Pleasure is not typically a commodity I trade in, Miss Vance. I am calling to inquire about your ankle, and to confirm the replacement. Canvas was satisfactory. His tone was all business, a stark reminder of the transactional nature of their interaction. My ankle is healing, thank you. And the canvas was perfect, Alara admitted, the word tasting a little bitter on her tongue. It was perfect, annoyingly so, a testament to his almost frightening efficiency. Good. I trust there have been no further complications. It wasn't a question, but a statement, an expectation of order. None, she confirmed. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken questions on her part, and an unsettling sense of purpose on his. Was there anything else, Mr. Volkov? There is. His voice dropped slightly, a subtle shift in tone that caught her attention. I require a portrait. A specific kind. And I believe you are the artist to paint it. Alara frowned. A portrait? From a man like him? It felt out of place. I primarily paint landscapes and abstract pieces, Mr. Volkov. Portraits aren't really my specialty. I am aware of your portfolio, Miss Vance. My research is thorough. However, I am not seeking a traditional portrait. I am seeking an interpretation. A capture of essence, not merely likeness. There was a hint of something in his voice, a depth she hadn't heard before, an artistic sensibility that surprised her. I have seen the way you capture emotion in your abstract work. The raw energy. That is what I require. A strange curiosity began to override her initial resistance. The challenge was intriguing, and the sheer audacity of his request, given her stated specialization, was almost alluring. And what essence would you like captured, Mr. Volkov? She asked, a spark of defiance in her tone. He paused, and she could almost picture him, standing tall and imposing, considering his words carefully. My legacy. The weight of it. The solitude. The burden. His words were stark, revealing a glimpse into a world she could barely comprehend, a world where legacy likely meant more than just a family name. Alara's breath hitched. This wasn't just a commission, it was an invitation into his guarded world, a request to see beneath the impenetrable facade. It was dangerous, exhilarating. That sounds complex, Mr. Volkov. And expensive. Money is not an issue, he stated, dismissively. Your fee will be commensurate with your talent and the sensitivity of the subject matter. Consider it fair compensation, beyond the inconvenience I caused. The last part was a concession, a subtle acknowledgement of their forced connection. Alara felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing her in, even as her rational mind screamed for her to retreat. This man was trouble, draped in custom suits and wielding silent power. But the artist in her, the part that craved challenge and depth, found itself drawn to the darkness and complexity he offered. And if I refuse? She asked, testing the boundaries, knowing full well it was likely a futile gesture. Another dry chuckle. Refusal is always an option, Miss Vance. But I believe you will find the opportunity compelling. And I assure you, my patience is not infinite. The veiled threat was subtle, yet undeniably present. He wasn't just commissioning a painting, he was asserting control, subtly reminding her of their uneven dynamic. Alara sighed, a mix of exasperation and grudging acceptance. She knew, deep down, that she was already hooked. The artistic challenge, the allure of the forbidden, the sheer magnetic pull of Elias Volkov himself, it was all too much to resist. All right, Mr. Volkov. We can discuss it. But I'll need to understand more about what you're looking for. And I'll need to meet with you. Excellent. Cashin will arrange a suitable time and place. Expect to hear from him shortly. And with that, he hung up, leaving Alara staring at her phone, a strange blend of dread and excitement swirling within her. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. True to his word, Cashin called within the hour. The meeting was set for 2 days later, at a private club downtown, a place Alara had only ever seen in glossy magazines. The instructions were precise: arrive at the designated entrance, identify herself, and she would be escorted in. No casual walk-ins, no lingering. This was Elias Volkov's world, where every detail was controlled. The day of the meeting, Alara dressed carefully, choosing a sleek, tailored black dress that conveyed professionalism without being overly formal. She wanted to project confidence, an air of being unshakable, even as her nerves churned within her. The club, named the Obsidian, was even more opulent than she had imagined. Dark wood, polished brass, and hushed voices created an atmosphere of exclusive luxury. A stern-faced man in a sharp suit greeted her by name and led her through a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors to a private lounge. Elias was already there, standing by a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. He looked even more formidable in person, his dark suit perfectly tailored to his powerful physique, his presence dominating the entire room. He held a glass of amber liquid, its contents swirling as he turned, his gaze immediately locking onto her. "Miss Vance. Thank you for coming." His voice was smooth, a low rumble that resonated in the quiet room. "Mr. Volkov," she replied, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. She noticed a faint, almost imperceptible scar just above his left eyebrow, a small imperfection that only added to his dangerous allure. He gestured to a plush leather armchair opposite him. "Please, sit." Alara took the seat, acutely aware of his intense scrutiny. He didn't sit immediately, instead observing her for a moment longer, as if committing her to memory. The air crackled with a strange tension, a mixture of professional formality and an undeniable, unspoken chemistry. He settled into the armchair across from her, his movements economical and precise. A small table between them held a silver tray with a crystal carafe of water and 2 glasses. He poured a glass for her, offering it with a silent gesture. "So, the portrait," Alara began, taking a sip of the cool water, trying to anchor herself in the professional aspect of their meeting. "You mentioned capturing an essence. Can you elaborate on that?" Elias leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. "I require a visual representation of the burden of leadership. The isolation. The constant vigilance. It's not about capturing my face, Miss Vance, but the spirit of what I carry." His words were heavy, laden with an invisible weight that seemed to press down on the luxurious room. "And you believe I can do that, with my abstract approach?" she challenged, a flicker of artistic pride igniting within her. "I believe you possess a unique ability to translate intangible emotions into tangible art," he stated, his confidence unwavering. "Your work, even your landscapes, speaks of an underlying tension, a hidden power. That is what I seek." Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. His insight into her work was unsettling, almost invasive, yet undeniably flattering. He had truly researched her, not just glanced at a portfolio. "And what is this burden, Mr. Volkov? What kind of legacy are we talking about?" she pushed, trying to probe the edges of his carefully constructed facade. He paused, his gaze drifting towards the city lights outside the window, as if contemplating the vastness of his own domain. "A legacy built on difficult choices. On responsibilities that extend far beyond personal gain. A legacy that demands sacrifice, and often, solitude." His voice was low, almost a murmur, revealing a vulnerability she hadn't expected. It was a fleeting glimpse, quickly veiled, but it was enough to pique her curiosity further. This wasn't just a powerful man, he was a man haunted by his power. "And the solitude," she prompted, her artist's mind already sketching possibilities, contrasts of light and shadow, bold strokes and muted tones. Elias turned back to her, his eyes piercing. "When you stand at the apex, Miss Vance, there are few equals. few who truly understand the pressures. The decisions. The constant threat. The last word hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the world he inhabited, a world where threat was not an abstract concept but a tangible, ever-present reality. A shiver traced its way down Alara's spine. This was it. The subtle hint of danger, the undercurrent of menace that had drawn her in from their first encounter. Threats from whom, she asked, her voice barely a whisper, knowing she was treading on dangerous ground. A ghost of a smile, cold and humorless, touched his lips. From those who seek to usurp. From those who misunderstand. From those who believe they can challenge what is already established. He didn't elaborate, didn't name names, but the implication was clear. His world was one of power struggles, of unspoken wars fought in the shadows. He was a king, and his throne was constantly under siege. Alara found herself mesmerized, caught in the web of his words, of the unspoken stories lurking behind his dark eyes. This was not just an art commission, it was an immersion into a dangerous, fascinating reality. "So, you want me to paint the weight of your crown," she summarized, trying to encapsulate the essence of his request. Elias nodded slowly, a flicker of something akin to approval in his gaze. "Precisely. The unseen weight. The cost of wearing it." He then shifted, his posture becoming more relaxed, yet no less imposing. "Now, let us discuss the practicalities. I understand your process requires observation. I am prepared to allocate time for you to observe me, to understand the nuances." Alara's breath hitched. Observe him? Spend time in his presence, in his world? It was a daunting prospect, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. "What kind of observation?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Meetings. Discussions. You may accompany me to certain engagements. Nothing that would compromise your safety, of course. Cashin will always be present, and your security will be paramount." His assurance felt less like a comfort and more like a confirmation of the inherent danger. He wasn't just offering access, he was offering a glimpse into the heart of his empire, under strict, protective surveillance. "And the location? My studio isn't exactly set up for this kind of access." She gestured vaguely. Elias gave another dry chuckle. "Indeed. I have a private residence, a penthouse suite. It has ample space, excellent lighting, and complete privacy. You will have a dedicated studio space there, fully equipped to your specifications." Alara's eyes widened. He wasn't just offering a commission, he was offering to bring her into his world, to house her, to immerse her completely. It was an unprecedented level of commitment and control. "That's quite an arrangement, Mr. Volkov," she managed, her voice a little breathy. "It is efficient," he countered, his gaze unwavering. "And it will allow you to capture the essence I require without unnecessary distractions or delays. Think of it as an artistic residency, funded by me, for the sole purpose of this commission." The offer was undeniably tempting, bordering on irresistible for any artist seeking a challenge and financial security. But the strings attached were invisible, yet undeniably present, woven into the very fabric of his power. "And what about my current commissions? My other work?" she asked, trying to maintain some semblance of her independent life. "They can be put on hold. Or, if absolutely necessary, you may continue them from the penthouse studio. My priority is this portrait, Miss Vance." His tone left no room for negotiation. This was a demand, cloaked in an offer. Alara felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Resistance, because her independence was being subtly eroded. Alara felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Resistance, because her independence was being subtly eroded. But also a strange pull, an almost primal fascination with the sheer audacity of his proposal. It was an offer to step into a different reality, to witness a world few ever saw. The artist in her yearned for the raw material, the untold stories. The woman in her, however, felt a prickle of unease. So, I would be living in your penthouse, she asked, the words feeling alien on her tongue. Elias regarded her, his expression unreadable. You would have a dedicated space for your work and your personal comfort. It is large enough to ensure privacy, should you desire it. And it would provide the necessary environment for you to truly understand the subject matter. He made it sound like a logical, almost clinical arrangement, yet the implications were anything but. It was a gilded cage, albeit one with a magnificent view. And my freedom to leave, she pressed, a tremor in her voice she hoped he wouldn't detect. You are free to come and go as you please, Miss Vance. You are not a prisoner. His voice held a hint of amusement, as if the very idea was preposterous. However, for security reasons, your movements will be monitored when you are outside the residence. And certain areas of the city will be off-limits, for your own protection. The freedom he offered came with its own set of invisible chains, a constant reminder that she was now under his purview. Elara swallowed hard. This was it. The full extent of the entanglement. She would be an artist, yes, but also a protected asset, a guest, and perhaps, a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. Yet, the thought of refusing, of walking away from this unprecedented opportunity, felt almost impossible. The challenge was too great, the man too compelling. I need time to think about this, Mr. Volkov, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. Elias merely nodded. Understandable. Cashin will provide you with a detailed agreement. Review it. Consider it. And inform us of your decision within 48 hours. He stood. Then, signaling the end of their meeting. I believe you will find the terms favorable. Both artistically and financially. As she stood, Elara felt his gaze linger on her, a silent intensity that seemed to strip away her defenses. It was a look that promised both danger and an intoxicating allure. She nodded curtly, a silent acknowledgement, and then turned to leave, Cashin already waiting by the door. The ride home was a blur. Her mind reeled with the implications of Elias Volkov's offer. An artistic residency in a luxury penthouse, unlimited resources, and the chance to delve into the psyche of a man who wielded immense, shadowy power. It was everything an artist could dream of, and everything a sensible woman should run from. That night, sleep was elusive. She paced her small apartment, the contrast between her humble surroundings and the opulent world Elias inhabited stark and overwhelming. She looked at her half-finished landscapes, the vibrant colors now seeming almost naive compared to the dark complexities Volkov presented. Could she truly capture the weight of his crown? And at what cost to herself? The next day, the agreement arrived via a discreet courier. It was thick, filled with legal jargon, but the core points were clear: a substantial monthly retainer, a bonus upon completion, a fully equipped studio, and the aforementioned monitoring and security protocols. There was also a non-disclosure clause, extensive and absolute, binding her to silence about everything she would see and hear. As she read through the document, a wave of fear washed over her. This wasn't just a job, it was a pact with the devil, a journey into a world from which she might not easily return. Yet, beneath the fear, a powerful current of excitement surged. This was an adventure, a chance to push her artistic boundaries, to create something truly monumental. She thought of his eyes, dark and haunted, and the fleeting vulnerability she'd glimpsed. He wasn't just a ruthless boss, he was a man burdened by his choices, by his power. And she, Elara Vance, the unassuming artist with red hair and a penchant for abstract landscapes, was being asked to paint his soul. The deadline loomed. 48 hours. She felt torn, pulled in opposing directions by her rational mind and her artistic soul. Her friends would call her insane. Her family would be horrified. But something deep inside her, a restless, defiant spark, whispered, "Say yes." This was a chance to truly live, to truly create, even if it meant dancing on the edge of a precipice. She called Cashin on the afternoon of the second day. "I accept," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Cashin's response was immediate and devoid of surprise. "Excellent, Miss Vance. We will arrange for your belongings to be moved tomorrow morning. A car will pick you up at 10 o'clock. Prepare for a new chapter." A new chapter. The words echoed in her mind. She looked around her small apartment one last time, a strange mix of nostalgia and anticipation swirling within her. This was the last time she would see it as her sole sanctuary, her independent haven. From tomorrow, her world would be inextricably linked with Elias Volkov's. The next morning, as promised, a sleek black car pulled up to her curb. Two men in dark suits, both impossibly tall and stern-faced, emerged and efficiently began packing her art supplies and personal effects. It was all handled with an unnerving precision, a silent demonstration of Volkov's reach and efficiency. Alara clutched her small travel bag, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She took one last look at her street, the familiar bakery across the road, the old oak tree in front of her building. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. The transition was seamless, almost clinical. Alara found herself whisked away from her modest life and deposited into a world of unimaginable luxury. The penthouse, perched atop one of the city's most iconic skyscrapers, was a testament to Elias Volkov's power and taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the sprawling metropolis, a glittering tapestry of lights that stretched to the horizon. Her designated studio space was larger than her entire previous apartment, equipped with every conceivable artistic tool and material she could ever need. It felt less like a workspace and more like a gilded cage, albeit one with an awe-inspiring view. Her first few days were a blur of settling in and observing. Elias was a man of precise routines. His mornings began early, with calls and meetings conducted in a minimalist, high-tech office adjacent to the living area. Alara would sketch him from a distance, trying to capture the subtle shifts in his posture, the intensity in his eyes as he navigated complex discussions, the way his jaw would subtly clench when displeased. He was a master of control, his emotions rarely betraying him, yet Alara, with her artist's eye, began to notice the micro-expressions, the fleeting shadows that crossed his face. Their interactions were initially formal, confined to discussions about the portrait. He would grant her specific blocks of time for observation, often during his less sensitive meetings or while he reviewed documents. She learned to blend into the background, a silent observer. Her sketchbook, her shield. Cashin, ever present, was a constant reminder of her guarded status, a silent sentinel who ensured her safety and, implicitly, her compliance. One evening, as Alara was working late in her studio, a soft knock startled her. Elias stood in the doorway, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He rarely ventured into her space uninvited. "Still at it, Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that always sent a strange shiver down her spine. "The light is fading, and the city lights are taking over." "The changing light offers new perspectives," she replied, gesturing to a charcoal sketch of him, caught in a moment of quiet contemplation, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. "It reveals different facets." He walked closer, his gaze falling on the sketch. "You see more than I show, don't you?" It wasn't a question, but an observation, tinged with a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a flicker of unease. "It's my job to see," she said, meeting his gaze. "To translate the unseen into the seen." He paused, then gestured to a comfortable armchair. "Join me for a moment. I find myself reflecting." Alara hesitated, then set down her charcoal. This was new. Unscripted. She sat, a comfortable distance between them. "Reflecting on what, Mr. Volkov?" He took a sip of his drink. "The cost of everything. The constant vigilance. The decisions that weigh heavily." He looked out at the glittering city. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to simply walk away from it all?" The question caught her off guard. It was raw, vulnerable, a crack in his carefully constructed facade. "From your empire?" she asked softly. He nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "From the expectations. The legacy. The blood that binds it." He turned to her, his eyes intense. "You, Miss Vance, you have a freedom I can only dream of. The freedom to create, to choose your path, unburdened by history." Alara felt a pang of empathy. Beneath the power, the cold exterior, was a man trapped by his own making. "Freedom comes with its own burdens, Mr. Volkov," she offered gently. "The burden of choice, of making your own way, of the constant struggle for recognition." He offered a rare, genuine smile, a fleeting warmth that transformed his face. "Perhaps. But your struggle is one of creation. Mine is one of preservation. Of dominance." The warmth vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar intensity. "Tell me, what do you see when you look at me now?" Her gaze swept over him, taking in the sharp lines of his suit, the powerful set of his shoulders, the weary intelligence in his eyes. "I see a man who carries the weight of 1,000 shadows," she said, her voice quiet. "A king on a throne of glass, always aware of the fragility beneath him." His eyes held hers, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, no longer just professional, but something deeper, more personal. It was the first time she felt truly seen by him, and in turn, truly saw him. Over the next few weeks, these moments of unexpected intimacy grew. He would sometimes join her in the studio, watching her work, asking questions about her technique, about her artistic philosophy. He began to share fragments of his past, carefully chosen anecdotes that hinted at the trauma that had shaped him, a lost family member, a betrayal that had hardened his heart, the ruthless choices he'd had to make to survive and ascend. He never revealed too much, but enough to paint a picture of a man forged in fire, scarred but unbroken. Alara, in turn, found herself opening up, sharing her own struggles as an artist, her dreams, her fears. She spoke of the solace she found in art, the way it allowed her to process the world, to find beauty in unexpected places. She found herself drawn to the paradox of him, a man of immense power, yet profoundly alone. A man who commanded respect through fear, yet yearned for understanding. The portrait began to take shape. It wasn't a literal depiction of his face, but a complex, multi-layered abstract piece.